women entrepreneurs, distinguished guests, practitioners of the culinary arts, gastronomes, friends, assalamu alaikum, and good evening. Welcome to tonight's webinar on culinary entrepreneurship. This event is the fourth and final part of our Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Growth series. Through this series, we have aimed to equip entrepreneurs with the tools to overcome challenges associated with building a successful business. U.S. Embassy Islamabad is proud to sponsor this event to empower women entrepreneurs in the culinary industry to grow their business and reach their full potential. Promoting gender equity and equality is a long-standing cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. It is inspiring to connect with outstanding women entrepreneurs who are dedicated to transforming their business ideas into reality and contributing to the economic prosperity of this country. The United States is Pakistan's largest export market. Both our nations gain when Pakistan's economy is strong and thriving. The United States is committed to the economic inclusion of Pakistan women entrepreneurs because they are critical to the economic growth and success of Pakistan. While a career in the culinary industry can be creative and fun, stiff competition makes upward mobility very challenging. I've seen this personally. My nephew has been grinding away for almost a decade trying to line up his own restaurant in the United States. And he will readily admit that women face additional barriers to success in the industry. Further, the profession is extremely vulnerable to economic and other external crises. And indeed, we need look only at the devastating impact of the COVID pandemic on the industry, which has left many out of work and some restaurants permanently shuttered. However, with adversity comes opportunity and innovation. We are grateful to our speaker, Ellen Kassoff, for joining us today to share her knowledge and insights on overcoming barriers to establishing a successful culinary business. Her experience is invaluable, and we look forward to her presentation. Special thank you and shout out as well to our entrepreneur, Cynia and Ejaz, who will be moderating this session and lending her expertise to the event as well. Cynia is an outstanding member of Embassy Islamabad's vast alumni network of talented and successful professionals. Our alumni are close partners, inspiring us with their creativity, innovation, and passion towards advancing relations between our two countries. We rely on their talent, energy, and experience to help us engage Pakistanis where they are. Now, I would also like to recognize the U.S.-Pakistan Women's Council for its assistance in organizing this event, as well as my colleagues at the Embassy for making this a reality. Finally, thank you to you, our audience, for joining us today. Your entrepreneurial spirit pushed Pakistan forward, and we're delighted to contribute to this effort. Now, I'm going to shut up and listen to a wonderful presentation, and I'd like to hand it over to Cynia to introduce our speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon, and Assalamu alaikum, everyone who have joined in today. Really looking forward to today's session and an amazing speaker here lined up, and thank you everyone for taking out your time. I'd just like to take a quick second and introduce our speaker. So Ellen Kassoff-Gray, she's the co-owner of Equinox Restaurant. This is one of DC's most lauded and respected fine dining establishments. She's also the co-owner of Federal Fritter and Bistro in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, that opened just this year in May 2021. She's a consummate manager and marketing professional. She's also a trailblazer, as you can see, amongst Washington in the hospitality movers and shakers community. She has years of experience in gourmet food sales, economics, and program management. She also manages operations and community involvement for all of the Harvest Moon Hospitality Group enterprises. Now, she has quite a lot of achievements under her belt. She was named the Manager of the Year by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington in 2007. And in 2009, she received the Women Chefs and Restaurants Golden Fork Award from the Front of the House Excellence. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Todd Gray. She's a longtime mentor of women chefs, and she works alongside with her husband, who is also the co-owner. Last but not the least, she's also the driving force behind the restaurant's critically acclaimed vegan fine dining offerings, including Equinox famous vegan brunch. If I'm there in DC anytime, I would love to go and have dinner or brunch here at this restaurant. So without further ado, Ellen, over to you for the show.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Appreciate the introduction. I'm going to see if I can manage this one just like we tried. Okay. Thanks for coming this morning. I wanted to just give a brief overview of some things that I think are important when you're starting your food service business. And remember, I'm just one woman, my approach, and there's many, many different approaches. So I'm just going to give some information as to what's helped me and what I've learned along the way in the past 30 years. Okay, now, sorry, oops, sorry. Okay, so there's many subjects to cover and I'll try to get through most of the basics. I think the things to keep in mind when you're starting to think about opening is finances, startup costs, social media, and marketing, and I've separated them from each other because they're sort of becoming two separate entities. Your community, your management style, your resources, and then we can have any questions and anything after. We can happy to help. So it all begins with a plan. So no matter how basic you need, you're going to do a street cart or something you're going to sell just from your kitchen. You need a business plan. It is definitely your roadmap. And something that I refer to often, and our one restaurant is almost 23 years, and I sometimes look back at the business plan I wrote in 1998, and I'm amazed at how much I stuck to our original mission. And it's a roadmap not just for any financial considerations, but for yourself. And in your plan, you should definitely include your executive summary, a description of your business, market analysis and your strategy for penetrating that market, a marketing and sales plan, competitive analysis, management and organization description, products and services description, an operating plan, and financial projection and needs. Again, don't let these subjects scare you. They sound, like a lot to tackle, but a couple sentences here, as brief as you need it to be. It's, again, your roadmap. So there's formulas all the way around in the restaurant business, but the two that I think you must know in order to be successful down the road are the COGSs, which is the cost of goods sold. It's very basic in the sense that your magic number, you're typically looking at trying to get to 20%. Remember, most restaurants take home anywhere between a penny on the dollar to 25 cents on the dollar, if you're lucky, at least here in the United States. And the way to simply get that number is to take your total cost of goods, meaning adding up all your invoices or your receipts, and you divide that by total sales for the month. So you always want to make sure that your cost of goods are in line, because if not, you have to adjust something. You also want labor, your percentage of sales. Now, it's always higher on startup, but aim for under 30% as you level out a bit. And you simply take total payroll divided by total sales. The first 2 years are usually the most difficult for restaurants. Most restaurants actually fail in the second year. It is the hardest year ever, because after the first year of excitement has worn off, you got to get through and stabilize. And that's where you pay attention in that first year to understand who your market is and what they want, and be willing to adjust and not get the ego in the way. So the golden rule that I live by when starting a new business is to have in the bank always rent, utilities, payroll, and food costs enough for 2 months in a traditional brick and mortar operation. This I'm talking about. Those three items, all else can be negotiated, but having 2 months of that in the bank through your second year can really help you, because undercapitalized restaurants are those that, you know, fail the quickest. Let's get off the negative. So, and down the road, I'm gonna throw some things out that you should always master, besides making great food: understanding your net sales, understanding your net profit and loss, occupancy expenses, your cost of goods sold, gross profit margin before expenses, operating expenses, labor cost, percentage of sales, and depreciation, like on your equipment and stuff. So those are just some general theories in business to understand. These proficiencies in these finances can be strong if you pay attention to them. And I think that many times operators get caught up in operating and they forget to pay attention to their finances, and then sometimes find themselves in trouble. So in your area of operation, you always want to pay attention to those items on your menu or whatever you're selling that contribute the most to your bottom line, and then which ones are dragging down your bottom line, and get rid of them quickly. So basically you have to be able to pivot quickly in these first 2 years and understand, maybe you thought that selling donuts was going to fly in your area and people really want the muffins, but you're really good at making donuts. Well, if people are ordering the muffins, make the muffins. So you have to be flexible, and you really have to pay attention to what your market is buying from you. Now, funding, it's always an interesting thing. And I wanted to give you some alternative sources of funding, at least here in the United States, and I know they're international, because not everybody can go to the bank and get a loan, or their families can't, you know, necessarily help them. Here we have things which you might have over there as well: ghost kitchens. Those are delivery only kitchens, incubators, culinary incubators, Commonwealth kitchens, where people get together and rent space together, lease an existing space. Maybe someone, if you're a baker and you want to bake in the middle of the night, maybe someone can lease you space in an existing space. There's rotating kitchens who invite chefs in residence to come for a couple months. It's an exciting thing. And these are also things that you can start as well. You want to also think about offering your product to sell to other restaurants. Like if you bake cookies, sell them to other restaurants or coffee shops. I personally, in one of my restaurants, buy the most amazing chocolate chip cookies from another cafe because theirs are way better than ours, and you know, why not? So, and then crowdfunding like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Angels List, and Food Start are also great ways to raise finances for opening. On your basic cost, you want to consider real estate and utilities, opening inventory, equipment, tables, chairs, decorations, a POS system and other technology, marketing and promotions. On the POS system, I want to say that there are so many different choices, and so many of them offer different bells and whistles. I got to tell you, most of which you'll really never use. So be careful when you're purchasing that, because you can really get caught up in the sales part of it and thinking that you're going to use a lot of these bells and whistles, but you don't really. So keep it basic. You can also find secondhand POS systems, which we can get into later. Also, remember equipment and smallwares. We found a lot of equipment on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, thrift stores, and even other restaurants in the area. Especially post-COVID, a lot of businesses unfortunately had to close and they need to liquidate. So you can buy a lot of things secondhand and save yourself a good amount of money on smallwares and equipment when you open. Marketing, so that comes in many forms. Starting with the basics again, getting your logo printed on just about everything. What I did, if you see down here the cone for our fritters, I simply saved a lot of money by getting a rubber stamp with my logo on it and stamping just about everything in the restaurant, our cones, gift cards, bags. So it's a very, very inexpensive and effective way to get your marketing, your logo out there without having to buy huge quantities. If you get them professionally imprinted, usually you have to buy in lots of 10,000 or more. And that's a little scary for a new business. So we stamp everything ourselves. Postcards and flyers for distribution. There's a lot of great places to create these kinds of flyers like Canva. It's free. And I'm not a graphic artist, but I've learned to, use templates that are offered in some of these online like Adobe or Canva to create flyers. As you can see here, just a little thing about my private dining that we offer. And I put it in the check presenter. So when everybody gets their bill, they see that, oh yes, we do private dining. Sampling product, ours, that was big for us. That's what we did for when we opened Federal Fritter, which is a little fritter shop. It's basically street food. And we sampled everybody for the first 90 days. Again, this is one of the most effective and inexpensive ways to market and get feedback on your product is to simply sample it and give it away, and you put that in your marketing budget. Blogging is important too. It's a nice way to start to build community. And when I say blogging, a little newsletter or start to develop that email list. It's really important to find where your guests are going to engage with you when they're not in the restaurant or eating at your Carter or whatever you're opening, finding out ways to get in touch with them. And then there's sites, of course, like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, any social media relevant to your geography, which is different for everybody. So in the beginning, we sort of tried everything and narrowed it down to where we get the most engagement, because it's really hard as a business owner to be on the internet all the time when you really should be in front of your customers. So you have to sort of boil that down. Marketing, I highly recommend taking an entire year and making a calendar like this one. I put like social media in a different color than search engine ads, email marketing, sponsorship and events, direct mail, video, and other. The first thing I do is I go through and look at all the major holidays in the calendar and decide, are we going to do something, say, for Christmas? I might not know what it is, but I know that it's going to be something because you usually do. You decide a different day of the week that you maybe want to offer fritter flight Fridays or something cute. So try to fill out your calendar and have it handy all the time. It also helps anybody who's working with you to understand what's coming up. So calendars are important. Email. I think email is one of the best and easiest marketing plans. Ways to market. And you want to decide what kind of emails. It should be part of your program. You can do them in the form of newsletters, birthday or anniversary coupons, re-engagement emails, like if you haven't seen them in a while and you want to bring them back in, promotional emails, menu updates. There's a lot of companies out there such as MailChimp or Constant Contact that can help you keep email lists and manage them. And you want to try to get everybody's email at every customer touch point. And you don't always want to try to sell something in your emails. Sometimes it's nice to just give something away, like a recipe or some fun facts or something like that. And you can always, to give people an incentive to get their email, you can offer them maybe loyalty points or future discounts or something like that. Or, some people do business card giveaways. You put your business card in a bowl and the winner gets, 20% off or something. So try to give people incentives for giving their emails, because those are sort of the gold standard still of marketing, even in this age of Instagram and Facebook. I think personally, community is incredibly important, especially with new young businesses, to engage in your community with charitable events. And you want to think about incorporating some event sponsorship or community sponsorship or other charities. I have a big affinity for animals, so early on I partnered with the Humane Society, and I created several events, helping to raise money. And I asked a lot of other restaurants in the city to come and join me. So, it became a community leadership for me as well. You can simply sponsor, maybe there's a local cricket club or a school that you could help to sponsor something for them. But I think that getting engaged in your community is really, really important for any fledgling startup business. Video, of course, is important on the marketing front. And before you get too caught up on video, you really want to sit back and see if your restaurant target audience does consume video content, of course, how much time and money you want to take to produce a quality video, and is the return on investment substantial enough to justify the video marketing. When I say video, I don't mean like an Instagram 30-second like on my website, I have a pretty professionally developed video that gives a good overview of the restaurant. It's at equinoxrestaurant.com. But I actually got this very inexpensive because I hired a local film student to do it for us. And he was excited because he got the opportunity to work. He did a great job. And it's still on my website 7 years later. So it's been timeless. So that's the kind of video quality production I'm talking about, not more of the handheld phone device videos. Printed materials as well. Learning, whether direct mail works for you or flyers out on the street. Are you going to send menus out by mail? Definitely find a good print vendor when you need one that can print professional signage. I like to print a lot of my own material, but there's some things that are just beyond me. A big sign or something, the format's too big for my printer or whatever, but find a local printer that can help you out. Oftentimes we need something on the fly, and if we have a good relationship, he can make it quickly for us. So it's important to find a good printer. Also to buy a good printer. I highly suggest investing in a laser color printer. A lot of times we have to pivot. We see our one restaurant is near the beach, and we started to notice at 3 o'clock a lot of people got hungry or whatever. So we wanted to make a special around the time where there was a lot of foot traffic, which wasn't included in my original business plan. So it was a quick shift, and we needed flyers quickly. So I have a nice printer in order to do that sort of thing on my own. And again, using those online companies like Canva, you can create a nice looking professional flyer quickly. So there's a lot of strategies on social media, and that could be a whole separate topic. And it can be also a lot of work. And there's a lot of strategies to research these markets depending on your product and your location. You want to keep in mind things like trending hashtags. You want vibrant photos. You want to be able to have a hyper local focus in your area. Even a 10-block area for us down at the beach is really, really important. And a lot of times you can hire a high school student or a college student to help. They're much better at social media than I am at my advanced age. And a lot of times they'll also work for trade. Your kids or your siblings can also be really helpful. I find that the more under 20 they are, the better they know how to navigate social media. So again, offer working in exchange for food or partial trade or things like that. I have a lot of trade relationships with professionals and students who are happy to work for a couple meals. So consider that. And then for marketing, of course, you want to decide frequency, how often are you going to post on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok? I mean, goes on forever. So it can be overwhelming. So you really want to drill down into what's important for you and to meet your customers where they are. There's also paid marketing on all of those platforms as well. And before you dive into that, make sure you really need it, but it can be very, very helpful. I find Google Ads to be very helpful. As I was saying, Google My Business is the first place I would go to set up shop. Google gives you a lot of metrics, of course, in exchange for all the information. It's not free technically, but it is. But the matrix that they send you every month are very, very helpful and can help answer a lot of these questions about where your customers are coming from. Your website is obviously important. I really like the company Squarespace. They have a lot of nice templates. They have good menus. They're good for restaurants. Google AdWords and search engine marketing and optimization are also things that you can learn how to do and understand from Google. It's a whole nother language for people like me, born in 1964. Learning these things was a lot, but once you get there, and then you find how useful it is. So back on the community and being a leader in your community, if you're opening in a understanding that when you open in a area where there's other restaurants, it's important not to look at them as competition, but to understand that you're critical mass. And where there's one great restaurant, there should be 5. And it makes the whole area better. So never looking at your neighbors as competition. And you should I've even hosted like an industry meet and greet, night where I invited people over to the restaurant, our new restaurant, to just meet us and our neighbors. I mean, we're always borrowing things from each other now, from, trash bags to receipt paper. So it's very important to adjust your thinking to your neighbor not being your competition, but you're all in this together. And, like I said, one great restaurant should have 5 others, and then it makes the whole community great. And then everybody wants to come to that area because there's a lot of restaurants to choose from. If there's professional organizations, a lot of times there's small organizations like, Main Street type organizations that are small, but concentrate in your area only, and they're important to join. The most important thing is to tell your story. And everybody has a story that is interesting, and it definitely attracts people to you and your product. People buy from who they like and who they can relate to. And that's one of the most fundamental principles in business that I have learned, is that they buy from you. I've had many mediocre meals, but I like the owners so much, or I like the atmosphere so much, I didn't see the meal as mediocre. People can relate to their fellow humans more than anything else. And the true sales driver is definitely you. And you are the brand, and you are unique. And to understand what your story is, everybody has one, to figure it out, write yourself a note like a diary and say what, why, when you started this business. It can be anything from, I had a dream one night, to my grandmother and I used to make these when I was 5. But as simple as your story could be, or as complex as it can be, getting your story out there definitely wins customer loyalty, and it gives people a very human face to your product. So refine your story, be able to tell it in 3 or 4 sentences, but do tell your story, put it in there somehow. I actually had ours at the top of the menu for the first 90 days. And we told a story with our space. This is our Rehoboth Beach restaurant. And I'm from Washington, DC, and Rehoboth Beach is 200 miles from my house. So I brought a little bit of Washington with me, and I hired 2 graffiti artists, again, students, so it was not very expensive, but they created a mural in our space. You can see part of it here, which was all these iconic places in Washington, DC. And so when people come in, they can relate to it, and they understand it, and they know we're from Washington, and we're not such, a new face. They have some comfort with us, because they see right away, oh, there's cherry blossoms up there. This is the Bayou. It was a famous, club in Georgetown, and some music venues. It's a 40-foot mural, and people love it. And then I also bought a lot of things from the community when I started. This is another view of the restaurant where the mural is here, but I went through the community and bought a whole bunch of mirrors, because when you're sitting on one side of the restaurant, you couldn't see the mural. So I thought, oh, well, let's put some mirrors on the wall. So every time when you sit on the benches, you could see the mural behind you. And I met so many people buying their mirrors. I went to thrift stores, again, Facebook Marketplace, online, everything. And it gave it, this is before it was finished, but it definitely gave it an eclectic kind of boho chic look, which was kind of what I was looking for. I wanted people to feel like they were in our living room. And then if you notice back here, there was this ugly view of the awning above me. So I hired a local glass artist. It's really important to find people in your community to buy things as local as possible. And there's artists everywhere. And she created these glass panels for me, which sort of blocked an ugly view. And it gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of artists in the neighborhood. And it gave me instant community engagement. And she's very proud of her work there. She has brought friends there. She tells people. So there's a lot of ways to market other than just straight in your face marketing. There's sort of soft marketing like this, where you use people in your area to buy certain goods that you need. and it will definitely help you to get to know the community more. And I believe that local artists are really important to support, so I looked for many ways to do that. This is our cone of fritters. And I had to educate our customers. Believe it or not, everybody's heard the word fritter, but they didn't really know what it was. So I put together the story of their origin and all that. I put it on the menu, but I also taught people how to eat them. Ours comes, in a cone like this. It's street food, it's portable. We have special sauces. So we taught people about mixing and matching their fritters with different sauces. So when you teach people something also about food, or you give them some cultural awareness of your food, it creates major brand loyalty, because when somebody learns something new from you, it changes everything and they remember you. So it's important to try to teach them something about your product as they're eating it. And this simple little cone of fritters sparks a lot of conversation, believe me. But most importantly, have fun. Stay creative, because I'm in this business not to do finances every month or figure out ad metrics or anything like that. I'm in this business because it's creative and it's changing all the time, and no day is ever the same. As you can see here, we made our way to catering on the beach one night, and I was really proud of that, and everybody had a great time. But happiness definitely trickles down from you to your staff to your customer. And opening is scary and you just need to relax, but remember the creative side of it, because that's, again, why most of us are in this business, is because we like to make things and we like to be creative. So have fun with it. And I think that is that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen, for that very detailed overview. I actually learned quite a few things myself there. We're now going to move to the Q&A section. We have plenty of questions coming in. So really thank you for all the participants who, just made sure that they had questions to ask. We'll start with our first question. That is, what did you find to be the most difficult part of starting your business, and how did you overcome these challenges?
I think one of the most difficult parts is definitely financing and making sure that you have enough in the bank, because there's nothing like putting all this energy into a business and then you fall short, not by your own mistakes, but because of lack of proper capitalization. So wherever you are leaning towards raising money for whatever it is, if it's a simple business or a more complex, brick and mortar restaurant, funding is really, really important, because there's so many unforeseen circumstances. I mean, a pandemic, for example, a lot of people didn't see that coming. So I think that having enough funds in the bank and having the discipline to wait until you are funded properly is a challenge. And it's hard because, say you have $100,000 in the bank, you say, okay, it's time to go. It's, let's do this, but you really need 200. It's worth the wait, and to make sure that you're properly funded. So.
Thank you, Ellen. Our second question is, can you give an advice on how to build a culinary business in the third world country? How can you be successful when you do not have the same resources that first world countries have?
Well, a lot of the things that I talked about are online, and if you have internet access, I think maybe we'll go assuming that you don't. And in a third world country, I'm not even sure what that means anymore, maybe just less resources, yeah, and modern, but you live there and you know what works. So it's not like you're going to this country for the first time, you know what works already. So if it's simply going out on the street, like I did myself actually with a cart, and I stood out there and handed out my product, you'll get a video after this email to you, so you can sort of have a better visual of the business that we started. But I think just knowing your marketplace, and you don't need a lot of these things to start a business. What you need is a good product and a personality and a venue, a place where it's okay to sell whatever you're going to sell, even if it's on the street. Make sure you have licensing or whatever, so that you don't get, in trouble. But I think sometimes it's better to strip away all these fancy things and get down to the basics, which is your food, and just getting it out there for people. You don't need a lot. And again, it's specific to where you live, but you know more about your area than I do, and look around and see what has been successful and what is working in your area, and take note of that and how they did it. And it's always worth asking if they'd sit down and talk to you and mentor you. So I think a lot of restaurateurs, you know, like I said, they're not as competitive maybe as you think they are, but I've had many people get in touch with me and ask if, you know, I could mentor them a bit, and, you know, if they could ask me questions throughout the year or whatever. And I'm flattered by it, and I'm very happy to, and I don't think there's any, you know, trade secrets here. So I think to find a mentor maybe in your area, and get your food out there, just start sampling it to people, to friends, to relatives. Because if you have something people go, wow, that's amazing, that's all you need. That's all you need to open is the product.
Absolutely. So another question is, how important is print media for the restaurant business, like newspapers, advertisements for marketing?
Do you mean when a reporter writes about you, or paid advertising?
I think it's just asking how important print media is for such stuff, for like, other than because in your slides you mentioned digital marketing, but how important is print
Again,
for the restaurant business?
It's really going to depend. I mean, sometimes I will support community local newspapers because I believe in them more than I do the big international ones. There's a lot of community papers. I'll buy ads, not necessarily to drive traffic into the restaurant, but just to support them. And that goes back to my community engagement and, you know, operating with a 360-degree view instead of a very narrow focus just on yourself. So print media can be important in that respect. I don't think I would go take out an ad in a big international newspaper because it probably would be a waste of money for me. But I look for small community newspapers to buy ads there. And every market has different places. Some people find it very successful to put an ad on the side of a bus. I think having printed materials is really important. Flyers are cheap and easy to give out. And again, you know, if you get a printer and a nice, you know, like I said, Canva is free if you have access to that, to print it yourself and hand out flyers on the street. That we call it like grassroots marketing, very organic, down to earth, nothing fancy. Get flyers out there. And again, if you're talking about print media to spend money to buy space, I support the smallest papers I can find. You also do want to try to get writers to write about you. That's important. So press releases and public relations, it's a whole nother lesson, but it is important to send out a press release to your local media when you open and invite them in.
Absolutely. Ellen, you touched upon the creative ways to build capital. Can you speak more about these methods and how you have used them in establishing your business?
Well, I've hit up family and friends. There's a lot of different ways, you know, going to a traditional bank. If you do go to a traditional bank, I will say you have to be very prepared with a business plan that is really tight, because they will, you know, really drill down into that, because remember, it's a bank. If you have no collateral, things like that, it might be hard. That's why I look at, you know, non-traditional sources like GoFundMe, which is something that can spread by word of mouth and online, and writing your proposal and your vision. This is the most important thing, because if you can impart excitement about your vision for the restaurant to somebody else via the written word, not just telling people about it, because most people say, oh, okay, send me something and let me look at it later. They don't want to hear you talk about it. But having 3 paragraphs of your vision and how you're starting is a good way to get on places like crowdfunding sources. Also think about if you're wanting to maybe help start an incubator. There's a lot of landlords, for example, that have empty space right now because of the pandemic and so many people closed. Maybe you can get together with 3 or 4 other entrepreneurial types and take out a space together. And again, the other way to try to get funding is get started and prove yourself. So maybe you speak to another restaurant in your area and ask if you can rent out some space and get yourself a name and a reputation and customers, and then funding will come easier. So I think the first thing to do is to be able to have a written page, not a lot. People don't have a lot of attention for reading too much anymore, but to be able to describe it in writing with some pictures. And this is the first step, is to put it all down on paper. I can't tell you how important it is, and to practice it and refine it and refine it. It would take me 2 or 3 months till I finally released, my call it executive summary of the business, because I rewrote it 15 times. It's like a school paper, it just wasn't good enough. So I think that the first step is writing and communicating your idea, and then finding a way to just get started. If you can't open a business, rent a restaurant right now and go through all of that, and you just want to start a little more humbly, like I said, take to the streets, ask other restaurateurs. And during that time, you can start your crowdfunding and things like that. But get that idea down on paper and get people to buy into it, and get, most importantly, yourself to see the path of how to get there. Because if you don't see it, nobody else will.
Absolutely. Ellen, do you have any advice specifically for women entrepreneurs starting off in the culinary industry? And if you can share some of the challenges that you faced yourself being a woman in the industry.
Well, there's one thing I will say with women, and I tend to hire also women, and I understand what it's like to be a mother and to have a job also. So one area I will say is be flexible and understand that. For example, my dishwasher can't get a babysitter sometimes. So I say, bring your kid to work. I set up a video in the office with some games and some toys, and I encourage her to bring her daughter to work, or her son to work, usually hopefully not 2 together, but so being flexible. I think men are flexible too, but understanding, I feel I have a little bit more of an edge, because understanding what it's like to be a mother and to have to choose between earning some money and also being there for your kids is a really hard thing for people to do, but it's a necessity. So if you can be the kind of person who understands what women's challenges are with home responsibilities as well as business responsibilities, and be flexible, I think that that's helped me retain a lot of employees. As far as being a woman and starting up, again, I don't want people to see me, oh, she's a woman, give her more of a, opportunity or treat her differently. I want people to buy from me because of the product and what I'm selling, and not because I'm a woman. However, as a woman, I feel that I do approach business differently, say, than my husband, as I just mentioned, with, my understanding. I don't think, if my husband were there that day and she brought her son into work, he'd be like, oh, no, go ahead, go home, whatever, we'll wash the dishes. Whereas I say, no way, come on in. Let's make it a night where you have your kids here. And that's that. So I understand. I think I have a bit of a broader perspective, with home life. And I think that's one of the things that separates us from men, is that, we tend to be the primary caretaker, obviously, of our children, and, making sure that there's groceries in the refrigerator and everybody is ready for school and this kind of thing. So, it makes us juggle a little more, but use this to your advantage, and in that you show sympathy and grace to your employees, and we all understand each other. So again, I don't want people necessarily to see me, just as a woman. I would like them to see that we have a great product to sell.
Agreed. So one of the participants is asking that I want to make my restaurant mobile. Do you have any advice on how to make this transition?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know where you're located, where you are, but I personally have a push cart. You'll see it in the video when you get it later. I painted it red, and I can literally walk to different locations, and without investing in a food truck, which I had thought about as well, but it's expensive. It requires maintenance, things like that. So if there's certain times in my area, where there seems to be more foot traffic, I will go there. But I think people love street food, and they love buying something off the street. And I've read some articles about your vibrant street food scene in Pakistan as well. So I think that street food is fun. It's very trendy. And I just got a cart, from a retail thing online that you can make a cart out of anything. So just take to the streets if you can, if it's legal, stay legal.
All right. Another question is, what steps did you take? And I'm loving the questions here as well. It just shows that this is a very interactive, engaging session, Ellen. The next question is, what steps did you take to start a business during COVID-19? And I understand your restaurant, Federal Fridges, opened just this year.
Yes, I did have the audacity to open a restaurant during a pandemic. I didn't like sitting at home. So what steps did I take to do this? Is that what the question was?
Yeah. The question is, what steps did you take to start the business during COVID-19?
Well, I think that in my mindset, I never approach any day saying to myself, this is what's going to happen. I think that what I see is that when life throws you curves, you lean into them. And if you are always keeping yourself open and looking for the opportunities, you see more. I would have never thought a year ago that I was going to open this concept during a pandemic. I was actually supposed to do it in Washington, D.C., but we ended up in a whole nother city, only because I was paying attention to opportunity and looking for opportunity. So I think the big thing is just opening your mind to possibilities. It might not even be in your city, it might be somewhere else, but I was out there, I was talking, I was looking at, different properties, just actually for fun, because we were, we actually were staying here in Delaware during a lot of this pandemic. So it just dawned on me one day to look around here, because this fritter concept was going to be in Washington, D.C. But we ended up opening it here just because I was just paying attention. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but I think that without knowing specifics, it's hard to answer this generally, but if you want to get specific later, you're welcome to email me or WhatsApp or whatever. But I think depending where you are and what your circumstances are, never think that you've unturned every stone. There's always more. There's always opportunity. You just have to look a little harder if you don't see it, and pay attention to certain signs that you see out there. Like I said, when life throws you curves, lean into them. And if you're open to possibility, anything is possible. I know that sounds so corny, but it's honestly true. And I think 90% of it is your mindset, is your mind. Your mind is the only thing that can get you going, and it's the only thing that can stop you.
Absolutely.
I know. Sorry.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. The next question, Ellen, is how have the supply chain disruptions in the industry affected your business, and how have you overcome them?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I was about to have a bourbon dinner on the 29th, and suddenly there's none of this product available because nobody can get the bottles. So it's time to be creative. And anything that has disrupted our supply has not affected me, because I don't buy a lot internationally. We honestly stay very, very local. I support local farmers. I'll go to a local grocery store. And if we can't get something that's on the menu, change the menu or tell people, I'm sorry, that's not available. I think people are very understanding these days, but don't be so married to something on your menu or you can't get it. I don't ever want to depend on anything or anyone that much. So if you're going to put an item on your menu or have a dinner based around a bourbon that I can't even get right now, have a backup plan and be flexible. So what did I do? I went to a bunch of the retailers to see if they have them. The bottles that I could get were, instead of doing a straight tasting, we're going to make cocktails out of them to stretch them longer. So flexibility, and that's the most important thing, is to be flexible.
Right, and I think that leads us to our next question, which is pretty much relevant. Most restaurants offer a lot of variety, and in doing so, they often miss out on their core competencies. The question is, how do you tackle the issue of what to sell?
Well, that's a tough one, because as I was saying, a lot of times the ego can get in the way, because you might think that, for example, this muffin you have is the best, and you put this and 4 flavors on, and you think everyone's going to buy the cheese flavored muffin, but what's really selling is the strawberry muffin, but that's not your favorite, but that's what your market is buying. You have to pay attention to your market. You have to pay attention. These are the people that are paying your bills. So you have to take your ego out of it and be flexible, so flexible in these first 2 years, because this is where you're really going to establish what it is you sell. And a lot of times you go into it thinking you're going to sell one thing, and it turns out that after the first year you see you sell hardly any of that, and you sold something that you didn't even think it was going to be a thing on your menu. So that's why those metrics and paying attention to those numbers that we talked about in the beginning are really, really important in these first 2 years, because you have to be flexible to your market, to your customers. And if your customers are telling you they like this better by what they're buying, you have to pivot. You have to be flexible.
Absolutely. I think the next question is pretty interesting. Is it a good idea to start a fresh restaurant or opt for a franchise?
That's an interesting one, because we call those independent operators. Franchises are really great for certain people in certain areas because they're a proven concept. What you're buying into is all the marketing materials and all the SOPs. By the way, there's a great website out there I want to tell you about. It's in the video you'll get later, but it's called restaurantowner.com. That is a subscription service, but it's really one of the ones that I would pay for. And there's just a wealth of information in there. But franchise versus independent operator, it really is going to depend on the franchise and how successful it is, how much it is to buy into that restaurant. So I think you have to weigh the circumstances with where you are geographically and how proven the franchise is. So without knowing details, I would not say one is definitely better than the other. With a franchise, you may not make as much money, but you might not have as many headaches either. So I think it really depends on the franchise itself and how successful and its track record, but do your homework.
All right. And I think because of the time that we need to stick to as well, we'll probably be just taking one last question, or maybe if that answer is brief, we'll take another one. So what have you found most effective in educating your customers about a new food item?
As in the method to do it is, again, sampling. Just give people, like, sometimes when they sit down, I say, oh, here's something new I want you to try. Tell me what you think of it. People are flattered that you're asking their opinion. They're excited for something free, and you need their feedback. So get your food into people's mouths. And that is the most effective way to find out, if something's going to work on the menu or not. Those small amount of dollars that you spend in sampling they really go a long way. And I think that's the most effective marketing beyond any, online presence or print presence or anything. Because also sampling leads to word of mouth, and word of mouth is still number one. People take recommendations when they hear them from a friend talking much more than they do any other place. And I have done this, research in my own way in the restaurant to find out how people are hearing about us. And I ask every customer, how'd you hear about us? My friend told me, and then they bring in friends and stuff. So word of mouth advertising is the most important. And when you give people a little taste of something, it heightens their experience. It gives you valuable feedback on your product. And people feel really good because they feel important, like you're listening to them as a customer and taking the time out to give them a sample of something and ask their opinion.
Thank you, Lynn. I think we just have one last short question that we'll take, and it's basically the parting one. Do you have any advice for people who are working from home and how they can improve their business while working from home?
I lost you.
Do you hear me now?
No, it clicked out. Sorry. Say that one more time. Sorry.
Okay, so the question is, do you have any advice for people who are working from home and how can they improve their business?
Yes, I mean, working from home is the ultimate, especially, you know, for women who have kids. You can either engage them if they're old enough to help. So the question is how to make it successful from home, or
Yeah, how can they basically improve their business while working from home?
well, the improving your business, I would say, is making more sales. So, you know, that's the ultimate improvement, unless you need to improve your product or your research or your development. But you know, always looking for new markets and new audiences, even in your neighborhood or beyond. Don't forget your community religious centers, schools, things like that. I don't know what you're selling from home, but how portable is it? Does it need refrigeration? These home businesses are some of the most successful. Can you sell them on the internet? Can you start an internet ordering system? You know, take the time, since you're at home, it makes it a little easier to access the internet and see how you're doing. Start some of the, you know, the Google AdWords, or getting yourself out on the internet more and to push sales that way. Can you mail things, whatever your product is? Again, I don't know specifically what it is, but I think that increasing your sales, no matter whether you're, again, in a brick and mortar, on a food truck, or at home, sales is the driver of any business, and paying attention to what customers want and what you can develop that's new and exciting. These are sales drivers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ellen. So I think, and sorry to the guys who, if there are any questions left, we are a little short on time. You can reach out to Ellen. And thank you, Ellen, so much for taking out your time for us and for the audience here. I'd just like to remind the audience that there will be a survey at the end. Once you guys log off, we would love to sort of like improve and get to hear your feedback for future sessions as well. So before we close, just do please fill out the survey at the very end.
And there'll be a little coming too. Yeah, I think you'll send a video that may answer some of these questions also. Sorry.
No, absolutely. No, thank you, Ellen, for adding that. All right, thank you, everyone. Ellen, good morning, good day to you. Ellen was actually taking this call at very early in the morning from Delaware, so thank you for that. And thank you, everyone else who joined in late in the evening. It was quite an interesting session, and it was a pleasure hosting you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.